Hello students, how you all are? I hope you must be doing good. And the chapter we are going to start today is Reproduction in Organisms. And I'm going to cover the botany part of this chapter. So without delaying, let's start. So as the chapter is dealing with the reproduction, so what is reproduction? It is simply a biological process which is useful for a species to continue itself on Earth, right? And what is important about reproduction is that it depends upon the internal physiology and the environment of the organism. The environment the particular organism is residing in, and it depends upon the internal physiology of the organism, that how the organism will reproduce. And now let's talk about lifespan. What is lifespan? Lifespan is the period between the birth and the natural death. And in NCERT, various lifespans of the organism are given, and some of them are rose. The lifespan of rose is 5 to 7 years. The lifespan of a banana tree is 25 years. You can learn it with me because they are given in NCERT. The lifespan of rice plant is 3 to 4 months, and the lifespan of a banyan tree can be 200 to 500 years. So if a question comes that the lifespan of an organism may vary from some days to thousands of years, so the answer would be yes, because in some organisms the lifespan can be of few days also. In some organism, the lifespan can be of few days. Right. Can be of few days. Like you must have heard the name of Drosophila. Very famous name. Drosophila, also called as fruit fly commonly. The lifespan of Drosophila is just 14 days. That is 2 weeks. Right? So, the lifespan may vary from just few days up to thousands of years. A peepal tree can live up to thousands of years. Some of these species of peepal trees have been reported to live for thousands of years. So yes, okay. And one more thing, that lifespan of an organism, you cannot correlate the size of organism. You cannot correlate the size of organism with its lifespan. Right? It doesn't mean that if the size of the organism is short, then it would be having a short lifespan, and if the size of the organism is large, it would be having the large lifespan. No, there is no correlation between the size of the organism and the lifespan. A parrot has a very much larger lifespan as compared to an elephant. Okay, so you cannot correlate size with lifespan. Remember this point. So this is all about the lifespan. Now, sexual versus asexual reproduction, right? We all know that what are the major differences between asexual and sexual reproduction? What are the major differences? Obviously, the asexual reproduction is majorly a uniparental process in which generally only one parent is required. But in sexual reproduction, the process is biparental. 2 parents are required. Then, in the asexual reproduction, see what I'm going to write over here. In asexual reproduction, gametes may or may not be formed. In asexual reproduction, the gametes may be formed or may not be formed, but what is certainly absent is fusion. Remember this point. Generally, it is, there is a notion that in asexual reproduction, there is no gamete formation. No, gamete formation can be there or cannot be there, but what is absent for sure is fertilization. In sexual reproduction, gamete formation is for sure present. Gamete formation is present for sure. Without gamete formation, sexual reproduction cannot occur. In asexual reproduction, fusion or fertilization is certainly absent. There is no fusion of gametes, right? But in case of sexual reproduction, fusion of gametes is certainly present. Okay, so these are the basic differences between sexual and asexual reproduction. In asexual reproduction, the progeny which are formed, they are clones to parents. They are genetically similar to parents. But in sexual reproduction, the progeny, the offsprings, they are dissimilar to parents. Right? So what is important to notice over here, that in asexual reproduction, there might be or might not be formation of gametes, but in sexual reproduction, gametes have to be formed. But in asexual reproduction, what is absent for sure, that is the fusion of the gametes. Okay, so these are the basic differences between sexual and asexual reproduction. Now, first of all, let's move on with the asexual reproduction. There are various ways in which an organism can reproduce asexually, and these are the following ways. Vegetative propagation is a means of asexual reproduction. Sporulation, binary fission, fragmentation, Gemmy formation, many of them, these are all the ways of asexual reproduction. Okay, now we will discuss all the means of asexual reproduction one by one. So I'm going to first take this vegetative propagation. In the method of vegetative propagation, a vegetative propagule is involved. And what is a vegetative propagule? It can be any part of the plant, right? And that vegetative propagule is not a specialized structure. Often it is thought that vegetative and asexual reproduction are one and the same thing. Yes, they are. But what is the difference between sporulation and the vegetative propagation, as both of them are means of asexual reproduction? So the difference is, in vegetative propagation, there is no involvement of specialized structures. But in sporulation, specialized structures called as asexual spores are formed. So vegetative propagation is also a method of asexual reproduction, but no specialized structure is involved. Any part of the plant is or can behave as vegetative propagule and can give rise to a new plant. Now, what is that property of the plant by which any part of the plant has the capacity to give rise to a new plant? And that capacity is called as totipotency. Totipotency. Any plant part, any plant cell has the capacity to give rise to a new plant. Has the capacity to give rise to a new plant. And because of this capacity the plants have, any part of the plant, whether it is root, whether it is leaf, whether it is stem, they can give rise to a new plant. But animals can't do that because we do not have the, every cell of our body, they do not have the totipotency, right? So There are natural methods of vegetative propagation in which naturally any plant can give rise to a new plant, and there are ways of artificial vegetative propagation also. So, natural ways of vegetative propagation are a root. Root can behave as a vegetative propagule to give rise to a new plant. Underground stem, subaerial stem, bulbils, leaves. And what are the artificial methods of vegetative propagation? Cutting, layering, grafting, micropropagation, etc. Now, let's discuss each one of them one by one. First of all, let's discuss the underground stem, how it is helpful in vegetative propagation. In some plants, the stem goes into the soil, and when the stem goes into the soil, it acts as vegetative propagule and can give rise to a new plant. Right? And how can you differentiate between the underground stem and the root? Because both of them are present below the soil. In a root, you will not be able to see nodes, internodes, and buds. But in the underground part of the stem, which is present below the soil, it will be having nodes, internodes, buds, and scale leaves. So this is how you're going to differentiate between the root and the underground stem. So this is, you must have read this in morphology, right? This is the detailed discussion in morphology. Various underground stems are, the first you can see over here, it is the diagram of NCERT. Obviously, this is a tuber. This is an underground stem, that is tuber, and the very classic example of tuber is potato. So what are the four major types of underground stem which are helpful in vegetative propagation? Rhizome, corm, tuber, and bulb. All four of them, they help in the vegetative propagation, right? And the classic example of tuber is potato. What you eat, potato is an underground stem. And the eyes on the potato, this question often comes. Obviously, as potato is an underground stem, it must be having nodes, right? And wherever there are nodes, there will be axillary buds. So what are the eyes of potato? What are the eyes? These eyes are the nodes present on the underground stem. And on these nodes, these potato, they have axillary buds. And these axillary bud give rise to a new plant. These axillary bud give rise to new plant. Okay? So tuber, a potato is a tuber, and the eyes on the potato are the nodes on the underground stem, and these nodes bear axillary buds, and these axillary buds give rise to new plants. So this question often comes, that which part of potato give rise to new plant? And your answer will be axillary bud. Now comes the rhizome. This is rhizome, and the classic example of rhizome, you can see proper nodes, internodes, buds, and adventitious roots in the underground part of the stem, that is called as rhizome. And the classic example of rhizome is ginger, banana. Okay? Ginger, banana, and turmeric. These are the classic examples of the rhizome, the underground stem. Then comes the bulb. And the classic example of bulb is onion, garlic, and lily. Bulb is also an underground stem which help in vegetative propagation. When you cut salad, when you take a piece of onion, then you see a white hard material at the base of the onion. That is the underground stem. The underground stem of the onion is a highly reduced white colored disc shaped structure which bears many leaves called as the scale leaves, which are fleshy, which stores food and water, and you eat the fleshy buds of the onion, right? Then comes the corm. Corm is the largest underground stem. This is the corm. You can see here, this is the diagram of the corm, and it also has nodes, internodes, scale leaves in it, and it also helpful in the vegetative propagation. The classic examples of corm are zamikand. Zamikand, the scientific name of zamikand is Amorphophallus. Amorphophallus. And Colocasia. Colocasia, commonly known as Arbi. Crocus, that is saffron. So these are some examples of corm. Okay? So this slide is important. What kind of question comes from this part? Example based questions. Now you know potato example, the example of tuber is potato, underground stem. Then onion, garlic lily, bulb. Then Amorphophallus, Colocasia and crocus, corm. And the rhizome, ginger, banana and turmeric. Okay, so these all are underground stems which are helpful in the vegetative propagation. Then comes the subaerial stem. That means their lower portion is in touch with the soil and the upper portion is in the air. So they are subaerial in nature, right? And these subaerial stems, they also are helpful in vegetative propagation. So the examples are, you can see over here in the first diagram, this is the stolon. Stolon, right? And what is special about stolon, you can see here, these arches are formed. This is the lateral branch. This is the lateral branch of the plant, and this lateral branch forms the arch. And at the end of the arch, this is the node. From the node, adventitious roots come out and bud comes out, and ultimately this gives rise to a new plant. So this is how the stolon is helpful in vegetative propagation. Now, what are the examples of stolon? Mint and jasmine. Mint and jasmine. These are the two major examples of stolon. Then comes the second one is the runner. Runner is also the subaerial stem, and you can see over here, beta, that the lateral branch, this is the lateral branch, the lowermost lateral branch comes in contact with soil. This one is the lowermost lateral branch of the aerial stem. It comes in contact with soil, and wherever there are nodes, the adventitious roots comes out and it gives rise to a new plant. This is how grasses grow. So the classic examples of runner are grasses, right? In NCERT it is given as oxalis also. In NCERT it is given as strawberry also. In certain books, strawberry is given in stolon also, but there are various varieties of strawberry, but in NCERT strawberry is given in runner. So we will learn it in runner. Okay. Now comes the sucker. What is a sucker? The classic example of sucker is banana. What happens is, from the underground part of the stem, listen carefully, from the underground part of the stem, a lateral branch comes out. From the underground part of the stem, a lateral branch comes out. It grows obliquely for some distance below the ground and then comes out. And when it comes out, it gives rise to a new plant. So that is sucker. So you'll say, ma'am, in banana, both sucker and rhizomes are present? Yes. Banana has underground stem rhizome also, and that rhizome give rise to sucker, and the new plantlets formed in case of banana are suckers. Okay, so this is a sucker. You can see it came out from the underground part of the stem, it came out of soil, and it will give rise to a new plant, right? So these are the suckers. So sucker is also an example of subaerial stem. And the other examples of sucker are, the examples of sucker will be banana, chrysanthemum, and pineapple. You can learn these examples along with me and your chapter will be ready. Because the NEET can give only these kind of examples. These examples will be enough for NEET, whatever I'm telling you here. So banana, chrysanthemum, pineapple, the examples of sucker. Then comes the offset. This is very important. Offset. It is the subaerial stem found in case of aquatic plants. Offset is found in case of aquatic plants or the hydrophytes, which are found in water. So a part of their stem is in contact with the water and a part of their lateral branch is in contact with air. So this is called as the subaerial stem. And what is important about offset is, this is the offset, this is the plant, a lateral branch came out of it. This lateral branch bear nodes, and from the nodes you can see a tuft of fibers is coming out. You can see a tuft of fiber is coming out. And what is this tuft of fiber? These are the adventitious roots. And wherever there are nodes, you can see a rosette of leaves. You can see a circularly arranged pattern of leaf. This is called as rosette of leaves. So this question directly comes that which kind of subaerial stem has shorter internodes, and the nodes bear tuft of fibers and rosette of leaves. So your answer will be offset. And this is found in case of aquatic plants. And with the help of offset, the aquatic plants, they vegetatively propagate. The very classic example of this is pistia. The example of offset is pistia, and the second example is eichhornia. Eichhornia, also called as water hyacinth. Also called as water hyacinth, right? And what is the special about this eichhornia? It is given in NCERT also, that this eichhornia is also called as the terror of Bengal. Why it is called as the terror of Bengal? Because this is an aquatic weed. This is a problematic weed. This particular plant, eichhornia, was introduced in India because of its beautiful flowers. But we didn't know that this plant will become so problematic in the water bodies of India, because this plant, it reproduces so fast with the help of offset. It reproduces very fast with the help of offset, and in a while it covers the whole water body and cause problems for the other aquatic life. So this is a very problematic weed which was introduced in India. And one more question comes, that it is found in stagnant fresh water. This question often comes. This is found in stagnant fresh water. Stagnant, not running, but stagnant. Eichhornia is found in stagnant fresh water, not in marine water. Okay. So these four are the examples of the subaerial stem: stolon, runner, sucker, and offset. I hope you've learnt the examples with me. Now let's move on further. Bulbil. What are bulbils? Bulbils are the fleshy buds. Bulbil are the fleshy buds which are found on different parts of plant. These are fleshy buds which are found on different parts of plants, and these fleshy buds, they help the plant in vegetative propagation. And bulbils are most commonly found in the agave. This is the example of NCERT. This is the diagram of NCERT in which the bulbil of agave is shown. And the examples are agave, pineapple, oxalis. In all these plants, the bulbils are formed and help in vegetative propagation. Then comes the leaves. As I just told you that every plant part is totipotent in nature and can give rise to a new plant. So leaves can also be helpful in vegetative propagation. As you must have seen bryophyllum, this is the diagram of NCERT, that the bryophyllum, from the leaf of the bryophyllum, some adventitious buds come out, and these adventitious buds, they give rise to new plant. You can see this is the leaf of bryophyllum and it is giving rise to a new plant over here. So this is the reproductive leaf which is helping out the bryophyllum in vegetative propagation. So leaves can also act as a vegetative propagule, and leaves act as vegetative propagule in bryophyllum. In case of bryophyllum, bignonia, etc. Right? Bryophyllum and bignonia. So the leaf, this question directly comes, leaf of which plant bears adventitious buds and can give rise to a new plant? So the answer would be bryophyllum. Okay? Then root. In some plants, root also act as vegetative propagule naturally and can give rise to a new plant, as in case of Dahlia, Dalbergia and asparagus. These examples directly comes. These are the roots of, you can see in the diagram, these are the roots of Dahlia which are reproductive in nature and act as vegetative propagule. So these are the very famous examples: Dahlia, Dalbergia, asparagus. These have reproductive roots which help in asexual reproduction. Now, artificial propagation. In artificial propagation, we take any plant part, and to form, we take any plant part like root, leaf or stem to form a new plant. When we do it artificially, then that is artificial propagation. What we have read up till now were the means of natural vegetative propagation, but we can do it also artificially. And what are the means of artificial propagation? Artificial vegetative propagation can be done with the help of cutting, layering and grafting. So cutting, layering and grafting, these are the means of artificial vegetative propagation. What we do in cutting, we take a part of stem, leaf or root and we dip any plant part. We dip any plant part in oxin solution. We take any plant part like root, leaf and stem, because every plant part is totipotent in nature, and we dip that plant part in oxin solution, and the oxin used over there is IAA or NAA, naphthalene acetic acid or indole acetic acid. And what does this oxin solution induce? It induces rooting in that plant part. And then after roots are induced, we can sow that plant in the soil and new plant will be formed, right? So we can take stem cuttings. We take stem cuttings in case of rose and citrus fruits. We can take leaf cutting. We take leaf cutting in the plant Sansevieria. Sansevieria is also called as a snake plant. We can take root cuttings as in case of blackberry and raspberry, right? So this is the important point, that when we take the method of cutting, we take the help of oxin solution like IAA and NAA to induce rooting. Then comes layering. What is done in case of layering? We pull the lateral branch, the lowermost lateral branch, we pull it and we make a cut in the lateral branch, and then we cover it with soil, right? And then from the part which was injured, it shows the highest meristematic activity, and from that part roots comes out and then it gives rise to a new plant. So this method is called as layering. And then comes the grafting. What is important to note here that grafting is seen only in dicots. It is not seen in case of monocots. Why? Why? I will just tell you the reason. Just remember this, that grafting cannot be done in case of monocots like wheat, rice, maize, rye, sorghum, sugarcane, bamboo, etc. So what we take in the method of grafting, we take a stalk and a scion. What is a stalk? A stalk is a plant. A stalk is a plant whose root system is very good. And a scion is a plant whose shoot system is good. Suppose I'm taking two mango varieties. One mango variety has a good root system and the other mango variety has a good shoot system. So ultimately the composite plant which will be formed after grafting, the composite plant which will be formed after grafting will have the characters of scion. It will not having the characters of stalk because we are exploiting only the root system of the stalk, but the composite plant formed after grafting, it will have all the desirable characters of the scion. Okay, and the plant formed after grafting, is not called as a hybrid, but it is called as a composite plant. Right? So a scion, a stalk, its root system is exploited, its shoot system is exploited, and then they are grafted on each other. So when they are grafted on each other, what we have to take care of that the cambium should be superimposed. The cambium should be superimposed. The cambium of the stalk should be superimposed on the cambium of the scion. Now, what is cambium? Cambium is a special type of meristematic tissue found only in dicots and not in case of monocots, right? So, because of this, because of the requirement of superimposition of cambium, grafting is not seen in case of monocots, but in case of dicots. And the plant formed over here, it is not a hybrid plant. It is not a hybrid. This is called as a composite plant. This is called as a composite plant having all desirable characters of scion. All desirable characters of scion, because we want the composite plant to have all the desirable characters of scion. We are taking stock only for the root system. Okay, so this is grafting. Now, micropropagation, it's also a method of artificial vegetative propagation. What we take any plant part, leaf, stem or root, right, which is called as the explant. Suppose I'm taking the part of a leaf, right? Then what will I do? I will transfer this plant part into a medium having the agar in it, and that medium will be having all the important nutrients which are required for the growth of the plant, and the plant hormones also like auxin and cytokinin. This medium will be having the plant hormones like auxin and cytokinin, and soon after what will happen, new small plants will be formed in this culture medium, and later on they are sown into the soil. So this is how, with the help of micropropagation, often called as tissue culture, tissue culture. So these all are the methods of artificial vegetative propagation. Now comes, so vegetative propagation is finished. Vegetative propagation is one of the means of asexual reproduction in which specialized structures are not involved, but any plant part called as vegetative propagule can be involved. And vegetative propagation can be natural, it can be artificial. Now, let's come on to the second method of asexual reproduction, that is sporulation. And sporulation involves formation of specialized structures. It involves formation of specialized structures called as, those specialized structures are called as asexual spores. asexual spores. And remember, asexual spores are always mitospores. That means they always are the product of mitosis. They will never the product of meiosis. Remember this also, because they are the asexual spores. So they are formed over the main body of the plant by mitosis, not by meiosis. Right? So remember this. Now, two important asexual spores which are discussed in your syllabus is, the first one is zoospore. The first asexual spore, which is very important, is zoospore. And the second important asexual spore is conidia. Now, the line I'm going to write over here is very important. Zoospore is the most common asexual spore of algae. Zoospore is the most common asexual spore of algae, and conidia is the most common asexual spore of fungi. This is pretty important. In algae, what you commonly see is zoospore, and in fungi, the most common asexual spore is conidia. Directly, the line comes directly in the question. Now, zoospore is motile in nature. Remember, zoospore is motile in nature because you can see flagella over here, and this is endogenous in origin. What is the meaning of endogenous? It is formed inside the structure. It is formed inside zoosporangium. While on the contrary, conidia is a non-motile asexual spore of fungi because there are no flagella over it, and conidia is exogenous in origin. What is the meaning of exogenous? That it is not formed inside the structure, but it is formed over the penicillium, over the hyphae of the penicillium. So what you are seeing here in the diagram is the diagram of penicillium. And you know penicillium is a fungi. And what you're seeing over here is the diagram of Chlamydomonas. And Chlamydomonas is an algae. So remember, this is very important. So asexual spores, zoospore, most common asexual spore of algae, which is motile and endogenous. And conidia is the most common asexual spore of fungi, which is non-motile and exogenous. Remember? So the question comes directly. Now comes binary fission. Obviously, binary fission is seen only in unicellular forms. Binary fission can never be seen in multicellular forms. It is shown only in unicellular forms. Okay. So this is how binary fission occurs. First, nucleus divides, then cytoplasm divides, and then it gives rise to the two daughter cells. And these two daughter cells are clones to the parents. These two daughter cells are clones, right? They are similar to each other and similar to the parent cell. And unicellular forms are seen, binary fission is seen in bacteria, it is seen in diatoms, dinoflagellates, euglena, paramecium, amoeba. That means it is seen both in eukaryotes and prokaryotes, but only in unicellular forms. Another means of asexual reproduction is budding. You know what is budding? A bud comes out of a parent cell, and then this bud gets separated from the body and give rise to a new organism. Bud is seen in yeast and hydra. Right? Okay. Now comes fragmentation. You know what is fragmentation? Fragmentation is a process in which a part of the organism gets separated from it, and that part can give rise to a new organism. That is fragmentation. And fragmentation is seen commonly in the filamentous algae. It is seen in the filamentous algae like Spirogyra, Eulothrix. right? It is seen in some fungi also, like rhizopus. And if you remember, I told you in the plant kingdom that it is also seen in protonema of mosses. It is also seen in protonema of mosses. Mosses are bryophytes, and protonema is a stage of gametophyte found in the life cycle of mosses, which shows fragmentation. Okay? Then comes Gemmy. Gemmy is important. Gemmy is found inside certain structures. This is the diagram of Markantia. This is the diagram of Markantia. And you know who is Markantia. A Markantia is a liverwort. It's a bryophyte. Right? So, this is the thallus of Markantia. This is the gametophyte of Markantia. So, here you can see this is the gametophyte of Markantia. Gametophyte or thallus of Markantia, and on this thallus of Markantia you can see special cup-like structures, and these cup-like structures, they are called as gemma cup, and inside the gemma cup certain structures are formed called as Gemmy. And what is important about Gemmy, that they are not asexual spores, they are asexual buds. This is very important. Gemmy is not a spore, it is an asexual bud. Remember this point. Because in bryophytes, asexual spores are not formed. And one Gemmy, one single Gemmy, it's a multicellular structure. One Gemmy is a multicellular structure, and it is green colored because they have chloroplast in them. So what is important about Gemmy? That Gemmy is found in certain bryophytes like Markantia, which is a liverwort, and they are found inside certain structures called as gemma cup. And Gemmy are not asexual spores, they are asexual buds. They are multicellular, not unicellular, and they are green colored. Okay, so with this, asexual reproduction is finished. I hope you understood the various means of asexual reproduction. Now, before moving on to sexual reproduction, I would like to discuss certain phases in the life cycle of a plant, right? So let's discuss the phases in the life cycle of an organism. There are mainly 3 phases in the life cycle of an organism. The first phase is called as the juvenile phase. Juvenile, right? In which, in case of in plants, what happens in juvenile phase, there is development of root, leaf, and stem. Or this juvenile phase in case of plants, it is also called as the vegetative phase. Okay, G. But what happens in the reproductive phase? It is a phase in which flower develops on the plant, right? So this is also called as the maturation phase, in which the plant develops the flower and it gets ready for reproduction. Senescent phase is the phase of aging, in which the plants undergoes the process of aging and ultimately it leads to death, right? So these are the 3 major phases in the life cycle of a plant. The vegetative phase or the juvenile phase, in this phase only root, leaf, and stem comes on the plant. But then a plant gets matured and it enters into the reproductive phase, in which it starts bearing flower and the process of reproduction starts. Then it undergoes senescence, that is aging, and ultimately death. Now, what is important over here, what I'm going to tell you, very important point, that there are 3 kinds of plants, right? There are three kinds of plants. That is annual plants, biennial plants, and perennial plants. There are three kinds of plants: annual, biennial, and perennial. What's the difference? The annual plants, they have a lifespan of few months, right? Lifespan of few months. Like examples are rice, wheat, maize, barley, rye, oat. There are so many examples. Their lifespans is just of few months. Biennial plants are those plants which have their lifespan is of two growing seasons. Lifespan includes two growing seasons, and two growing seasons doesn't mean that it means 2 years. No. What is the meaning of two growing seasons? That means if I sow a plant in February of this year, I will harvest that plant in the February of the next year. So it will take two growing seasons, right, to develop fully. So the examples of biennial plants are, there are many examples of biennial plants like beet, like cabbage, lettuce, radish, carrot. These are some examples of biennial plants. And then come the perennial plants. Perennial plants are those plants which live for many years. Lifespan of many years. Right. And most of the plants are perennial plants. Most of the plants. You can take various examples like mango, ficus. Ficus is the genus which contains banyan tree, peepal tree, fig tree. They all are the figs which belongs to the genus ficus. So mango, ficus, the most of the plants which you see around yourself, mango, apple, guava, most of them are perennial plants. Okay, so I hope you understood my point. Annual plants, lifespan 3 to 4 months. That means within 3 to 4 months, they do everything. Within 3 to 4 months, they undergo juvenile phase, then reproductive phase, then the senescent phase, and the death. Then biennial plants, they do it in two growing seasons. But the perennial plants, they live for many years. So just think and tell me that if you want to see proper transitions, that yes, now juvenile phase is, now the plant is entering from juvenile phase to reproductive phase, now from reproductive phase to senescence, from senescence to death. If you want to see all these phases evidently in front of your eyes, in which plants you can see that? In which plants you can easily, see, you can easily feel, you can easily demarcate all the phases undergoing in the plant? Obviously, in annual plants and in biennial plants, because they have such a short lifespan. So you will see all the phases going on, changing, the transition in the plant, you can see very clearly. But a plant who is living for many years, every year it will be having flower, every year it will be having fruit. So these three phases of life will not be easily demarcated in perennial plants. Okay, so one more thing which I want to tell you here, that plants can be monocarpic, and the plants can be polycarpic. Plants can be monocarpic. Mono means single, carpic means fruit. That means the plant which will have flower and fruit only once in their lifetime. All the plants which bear flower and fruit once in their lifetime, those plants are the monocarpic plant. But those plants which bear fruit and flower many times in their lifespan, right? So obviously this is so common sense. All the annual plants will be monocarpic. What happens in the biennial plants, in one growing season there is only the vegetative growth, and in the second growing season there is reproductive growth in which flower will come. So obviously in biennial plant also the flower will come only once in the lifetime. But in perennial plants, the flower will come every year, like in case of mango, like in case of guava, like in case of rose, like in case of many plants. So this is very much understood that all annual plants are monocarpic. All annual plants and all biennial plants, they all are monocarpic. That means fruit and flowers come only once in their lifetime. And some perennial plants, see what I have written. Just listen this part carefully. And here I am writing most perennial plants. Not all perennial plants. See what I have written. I have not written all perennial plants are polycarpic. I have written most perennial plants are polycarpic, which bear fruit and flower many a times. But all annual plants are monocarpic, all biennial plants are monocarpic, but some perennial plants, some are monocarpic also, and that is the exceptional case. So let's discuss the exceptional case. And the exceptional case is that some perennial plants, like, there are two examples given in NCERT, and those examples are bamboo. One example is bamboo and the another example is Strobilanthus kunthiana, which is also called as Neela Kuranji. Both of them, these are perennial plants. They live for many years, but they flower only once in their lifetime. This is very surprising to know that a bamboo plant can live for hundreds of years, but it flowers only once in its lifetime. And whenever it will flower, it will be full, the whole plant will be full of flowers, and just after that bamboo will die. Likewise, Strobilanthus flowers every 12 years. When it is 12-year old, it will flower, bloom fully, and then it will die. So these are perennial plants, but still they are monocarpic. So these two are monocarpic. They are perennial, but still they are monocarpic. Okay, this is important. So obviously you will be able to demarcate the phase in them also, right? For some point of time, they will be having only the vegetative phase in their lifespan. But at one point of time, they will flower and just after flowering, they will go senescence and then death. So, in these plants also, you can easily demarcate between the various phases. So, what I'm trying to see you here is that juvenile phase, then reproductive phase, and senescent phase. All these phases are demarcated clearly. These three phases are, this question comes, very, very common question, are demarcated clearly or differentiated clearly in all annual plants. First in all annual plants, then in all biennial plants, and then in monocarpic perennial plants. Only monocarpic perennial plants. So this question is very, very common. Question will say that in which of the following plants, let's do a question. What kind of question comes from this point? You'll have an idea. In which of the following plant all three phases are not clearly demarcated. And the options are rye, radish, bamboo, ficus. Tell, what will be the answer? Out of these four, in which plant all the three phases will not be seen, will not be differentiated clearly? This is annual plant, so no. Biennial plant, this is perennial but monocarpic. And ficus, that is peepal and banyan tree, this is polycarpic and perennial. So answer will be this. Okay, so this kind of question comes from this portion. I hope you understood the point. What are annual plants? What are biennial plants? What are perennial plants, right? And one more important thing in case of perennial plants, that the interflowering, this is also the line of NCERT, which is pretty important, and this question comes very often. The interflowering period in polycarpic perennial plants, the interflowering period in polycarpic perennial plants is a part of maturation phase. It's a part of maturation phase. This question often comes. Interflowering means this year mango has flowered and given fruits. Then in next year, it will again give flower and will give fruits. So this time period between the two flowering, it is called as interflowering period, right? So the question often comes, what happens during interflowering period? A plant rejuvenates itself for the process of flowering, because flowering takes so much of resources of plant. So this interflowering period is not a part of juvenile phase. Remember this point. It is a part of reproductive or maturation phase. This question often comes. Okay. So yes, so these are the different phases in the life cycle of plant. Now let's move on to sexual reproduction now. You know, sexual reproduction, it's a process which is biparental most commonly, and it involves the formation of gametes and the fusion of gametes and then the formation of zygote. So obviously, what are the three phases in the process of sexual reproduction? First of all, gametogenesis, that means formation of gamete, the first process. Then fertilization, that is formation of zygote. And then embryogenesis, that means formation of embryo from zygote. So, first the gametes will form, then fertilization, then zygote will form, and then the embryo will form. So, we can divide the whole sexual reproduction process into 3 phases, and that is pre-fertilization event, before what happens before fertilization, then fertilization, and then what happens after fertilization. So there are 3 events in the process of sexual reproduction: pre-fertilization event, then fertilization, and then post-fertilization event. Let's first discuss the pre-fertilization event. What happens in pre-fertilization event? There are 2 things. There are 2 things which happen during the pre-fertilization event. The first one is gametogenesis and the second one is gamete transfer. This happens before fertilization, pre-fertilization event. First of all, gametes will be formed and then those gametes will be transferred, right? So remember this point, gametogenesis and gamete transfer. These are the 2 steps which comes in pre-fertilization event. Now let's first discuss, now we are talking about the gametes. So let's first discuss how many kinds of gametes are present in organisms. So the organisms can have isogametes or homogametes. That means where the gametes are similar to each other. If the 2 fusing gametes, the male gamete and the female gamete, if they are similar to each other, that means the gametes are isogametes or homogametes. And these kind of similar gametes can be seen in case of algae and in case of fungi. Algae, Cladophora, Eulothrix, Chlamydomonas, Spirogyra. These are the 4 examples of algae in which similar gametes are found. And there are certain examples of fungi also, that is Rhizopus and Syncytium, which show similar gametes. Direct question comes. From this part, direct question can come, example based question. And what is important over here, this question has come in NEET. Cladophora, Eulothrix, Chlamydomonas, their gametes are similar. All 3 of them, they have similar gametes, but flagellated. All 3 of them, they have similar gametes and flagellated. But Spirogyra have similar gamete but non-flagellated. This is very important. Spirogyra have similar and flagellated gametes. This question has come in NEET. The question was Spirogyra has, and the 4 options were similar and flagellated gametes, dissimilar and flagellated, similar flagellated, dissimilar non-flagellated. Okay, so the answer will be similar and non-flagellated. Oh, 3, what I have written. Oh, sorry. Similar and non-flagellated. Okay. Similar and non-motile or non-flagellated, whereas Cladophora, Eulothrix, Chlamydomonas, they have similar but flagellated or motile gametes. Clear? This is important. This question has come in NEET. Now, the gametes can be heterogametes. That means dissimilar gametes. Dissimilar gametes. And dissimilar gametes can be seen in case of algae like fucus. Fucus is a brown algae. Volvox, green algae. Chara, green algae. So in all these algae, there can be dissimilar gametes, right? Then in all the higher plants, when we move towards the higher condition, in all bryophytes, in all pteridophytes, in all gymnosperms, in all angiosperms, the gametes are dissimilar. In case of bryophytes, the male gamete is motile. In case of bryophyte, the male gamete is motile, but the female gamete is non-motile. Likewise, in case of pteridophytes, male gamete is motile, female gamete is non-motile. But in case of both gymno and angiosperms, In both gymno and angiosperms, both the gametes are non-motile. This is important. In bryo, in all of them, the gametes are dissimilar, but in bryo and pterido, the male gamete is motile, female gamete is non-motile. But in case of gymno and angio, both of the male and female gametes are non-motile. Okay, there is one exception in gymnosperm, that is cycas. That is why it is also called as living fossil. Otherwise, generally, in all gymnosperms and angiosperms, both the gametes are non-motile. Clear? So this slide is very important. Direct question comes from this slide. I hope you got it. Yes. Now gametes are always haploid. This is important. Gametes are always haploid. They are never diploid, okay? They are always haploid, because when two haploid gametes will fuse, they will form a 2n zygote. So gametes can be formed by mitosis. They can be, this is a point of NCERT, very important. Gametes can be formed by mitosis, or gametes can be formed by meiosis also. When the parent body is haploid, then the gametes will be formed by mitosis. This is important, because when the main body is N, how can meiosis occur on N? Meiosis cannot occur in haploid body, right? When the main body of the plant is haploid, that means the gametes over that body will be formed by mitosis. And we know that in case of algae and in case of bryophytes, gametophyte, that is the haploid stage, is the dominant stage. So their main body is N. So the gametes will be formed by mitosis. So in all of them, the gametes are formed by mitosis because their parent body is haploid. But when the parent body is diploid, then ultimately the gametes are formed by meiosis, like in case of pteridophytes, gymnosperms, angiosperms, and animals. Okay, so this is important, that gametes can be a product of mitosis or they can be a product of meiosis. When they will be a product of meiosis, when the main body of the organism will be diploid. There is an exception over here also in drones. In animals, gametes are always formed by meiosis, but in case of honeybee, in drones, the gametes are formed by mitosis. Why? Because the drones in the honeybee, they are haploid. That is why. Okay, so this point is important. Now, what is a meiocyte? This is very important point. What is a meiocyte? A meiocyte is a cell in which the meiosis will occur to form gamete. So remember this beta, that a meiocyte can never be a haploid cell or a triploid cell or a pentaploid cell. A meiocyte should always be a cell which has even ploidy level, like 2n, 4n, 6n, right? So generally, a meiocyte is a diploid cell. A meiocyte is a diploid cell. So a meiocyte is a cell in which meiosis occurs. A meiocyte is a cell in which meiosis occurs to form gametes. And a meiocyte is always a diploid cell, and it will form after meiosis. After meiosis, a meiocyte will form the haploid gametes. Clear? Now there is an NCERT table which is given over here. In NCERT, it is given that the chromosome number in the meiocyte and then the chromosome number in the gamete. Obviously, a meiocyte is a diploid cell and a gamete will be a haploid cell. So it is given that in Ophioglossum, there is 630 number of chromosomes, 630. So obviously, 630 into 2 comes out to be 1260. So the number of chromosomes in Ophioglossum is a pteridophyte. This plant has the largest number of chromosomes in the whole plant kingdom. So it has 1260 chromosomes. Apple, the number of chromosomes in the meiocyte of apple is 34. So obviously it will be 17 in its gametes. In rice, it is 12. So meiocyte, it will be 24. In potato, it is, I hope you can solve this table. So from this table, direct question comes. From this table, direct question comes that what is the number of chromosomes in the meiocyte of rice? So what will be the answer? 24. Okay. So I can give you, because these three are very important, OMR. When you give the exam, you fill the OMR sheet, right? You fill the OMR sheet. So here the O stands for onion, M stands for maize, and R stands for rice. And what you can learn that in onion, the number of chromosomes in meiocyte is 16. In maize, add 4, 20 and 24. So you can learn in this way, right? These three examples are very important. OMR sheet, onion, maize, rice. In onion, the number of chromosomes in the meiocyte, that is the diploid cell, is 16, in maize 20 and in rice 24. So these kind of questions often come. Okay. Now let's discuss the sexuality in organisms. What does it mean that if an organism is bisexual or if an organism is unisexual? If it bears both the reproductive parts on the same body, it will be bisexual, and if the reproductive parts are present on the different bodies, it would be unisexual. In the lower organisms, we often use the term homothelic or heterothelic. Thallus means their body, because the lower organisms, their body is not properly differentiated, and it is called as thallus. Like in case of bryophytes, it is thallus. In case of algae, it is thallus. So if both the reproductive parts are present on the same body, they will be homothelic, right? And if the reproductive parts are present on the different structures, the different bodies, then it would be heterothelic. Like Mercantia is a bryophyte, which is heterothelic because the male part is present on the male thallus and the female part is present on the female thallus. Mucor is a fungi. Rhizopus is also a fungi. So in lower organisms, for the homothelic is also called as bisexual, or bisexual is also called as monoecious, right? And heterothelic is also called as unisexual or dioecious. Remember this thing, or dioecious. This is opposite. Unisexual is dioecious and bisexual is monoecious. Okay. Now let's move on further. Yes. In higher organisms, we often use the term monoecious or dioecious for the sexuality. Monoecious, I just told you, monoecious is bisexual, being bisexual, and dioecious means being unisexual. Like I just told you. This is the example of Cara. The diagram you're seeing here is Cara, which is a green algae, which is a multicellular green algae. And the diagram you're seeing here is Mercantia, which is dioecious or unisexual, right? So to explain the sexuality of organism, we can use the terms homothelic or heterothelic, or we can use the term monoecious or dioecious. Clear? Now there are some more examples over here which I would like to discuss. Monoecious plants. Monoecious plant means the whole plant is monoecious. The whole plant is bisexual. That means the whole plant bears both the reproductive parts, that is stamen and carpel. A plant can be monoecious in two conditions. a plant can be monoecious in two conditions. That means if it bears bisexual flowers, if it has bisexual flowers on it, and a plant can be monoecious if it has unisexual flower but of both the types. This is the male flower, this is the female flower. So a monoecious plant is a plant if it either has bisexual flowers or it has unisexual flowers of both types. This question often comes. If a plant has bisexual flower, right, all the flowers are bisexual on the plant, then the whole plant will also be bisexual, because on the whole plant, the reproductive. My daughter is there in outside and she is giving me cute expressions. Yeah. So if the plant has bisexual flowers, so obviously the whole plant will be bisexual. And if the plant has some flowers are male flowers, some flowers are female flowers, the flowers are unisexual, but the whole plant is bisexual because it has both male and female flowers. Are you getting my point? So this kind of condition is very common in angiospermic plants, where the whole plant is monoecious, the whole plant is bisexual because all the flowers present on it are bisexual, right? This is the most common condition found in many plants like China rose, like mustard, brinjal, potato, many of them. Very common condition. Then here the whole plant is bisexual, but it bears unisexual flower, and the unisexual flower are of both the types. The example over here are maize, castor, coconut, cucurbits. Now what are cucurbits? All the climbers like watermelon, like cucumber, pumpkin, these all are the cucurbits. Right, then the plant can be dioecious. Dioecious plant or the unisexual plant. The whole plant is unisexual, and this condition can be there only if plant bears only unisexual flowers of one type. Plant bears unisexual flowers of only one type. That means on one plant there are only male flowers. That is staminate flowers. And on the other plant there are only female flowers. That means pistillate flowers. Right? So this whole plant will be unisexual and it bears flower only one type of unisexual flower. So that kind of plant is a dioecious plant. And the examples are papaya, date palm. The scientific name of date palm is phoenix, and Wellisneria. Wellisneria is an aquatic plant. This slide is very important because the question comes directly. Question comes that which kind of plant is monoecious but bear unisexual flower? Plant is monoecious but it bears unisexual flowers. The example will be maize, castor, coconut, cucurbits. The plant is monoecious and it bears bisexual flowers. Very common condition. The plant is dioecious. That means it bears either only the male flowers on one plant or the female flowers. The examples are papaya, date palm, Vallisneria. Question comes directly. So these examples are very, very important. And I'm not going to tell you again this thing in the next chapter, which I'm going to deal, that is sexual reproduction in flowering plants. This slide is very important because this will be used in sexual reproduction of flowering plants also. So this is very important here to remember this thing, okay? Yeah. Now, Chara. Chara is a special algae. Why it is a special? Because it is a multicellular green algae which has the gametophyte. This is the gametophyte of the Chara, which seems like that of higher plant. So this is a advanced algae which bears multicellular jacketed organs. It bears multicellular jacketed organs. Remember this point. This is very important. In algae, I have told you this in the plant kingdom, that in algae, the sex organs are unicellular and they are not jacketed. But Chara is an exceptional case where the sex organs are multicellular and jacketed, just like bryophytes and pteridophytes. So this is a bit advanced algae. Okay, so you can see this is the gametophyte of Chara. This is the gametophyte of Chara, which has a sort of, plant-like structure. This is the axis on which it has leaf-like structures. And when you see these leaf-like structures, they bear the sex organs on them. These leaf-like structures, they bear sex organs on them. And this is the female sex organ, which is called as oogonium or nucule. It is also called as nucule. And this is on the leaf-like structure. This is the leaf-like structure on the upper surface. Both are present on the upper surface. In the diagram, it feels as if the female sex organ is present on the upper side and the male sex organ. No, both are present on the upper surface, but the oogonium is present towards the, it is present towards the upper side and it is present towards the lower side, but on the upper side also. What I am trying to say here is that they are present on the adaxial surface. Both of them are present on the adaxial surface, but it is present towards upper side and it is present towards lower side, right? Okay, so antheridium is also called as globule. So this is the diagram of NCERT you can see over here. And moreover, Chara, most of the species of Chara, Chara is monoecious. That is bisexual. You can see that the female reproductive part and the male reproductive part both are present on the same plant. Very few species are dioecious also, but commonly Chara is monoecious. Okay. Now let's move on to Marchantia. Marchantia, you know that this is also what? This is dioecious. This is dioecious because the male thallus is different and the female thallus is different. It is not bisexual, it is unisexual or heterothallic. Right? So this is the male thallus which bears the sex organs at the top. This is the sex organ which is present at the top. And this I have told you in plant kingdom also, that the sex organs of Marchantia, they are present on a stalk-like structure, and this stalk is called as antheridophore. And this is called as archegoniophore. The sex organs of Marchantia are present on stalk, and these stalks are called as gametophores. these stalks are called as gametophore. If it is present, this is stalk, if it is present on male thallus, it is specifically called as enthridiophore, at top of which the sex organ is present. Okay? Yeah. Now the gamete transfer. Gamete transfer means now the gametes are formed, now they need to be transferred. So, how gamete transfer takes place? In case of lower plants like algae, bryophytes, and pteridophytes, gamete transfer is done by water. This is important. In lower plants like algae, bryophytes, and pteridophytes, the gamete transfer is done by water. But in case of gymnosperms and angiosperms, in the point I'm going to write over here is very important. Just listen to it carefully. That in gymnosperms and angiosperms, very beautiful line. Acha, just think. What will happen in case of gymnosperms and angiosperms? Gamete transfer will be done by? In gymno and angio, gamete transfer will be done by? You will say it can be done by wind, water, insects, animals. No, this is wrong. In gymno and angiosperms, gamete transfer, this line is very important. See what I've written here. In case of gymnosperms and angiosperms, the gamete transfer is done by pollen tube, not by the various pollinating agents. Because the pollinating agents, they do not transfer the male gamete, they transfer pollen grain. Pollen grain is pollinated by the pollinating agents, not the male gamete. The male gamete reaches to the egg cell with the help of pollen tube, both in gymnosperms and angiosperms. This is a very important point to remember. So, in gymnosperms and angiosperms, the gamete transfer is done by pollen tube, and in gymnosperms, pollen grains, not gametes, but pollen grains are transferred generally by wind. In gymnosperms, the pollen grains are transferred by wind, and in angiosperms, pollen grains are transferred by various pollinating agents, most commonly insects. It can be water, it can be air, etc. Right? So this is important beta, remember. So in algae, bryo, and pterido, the gametes are transferred by water. In gymnoangio, the gametes are transferred by pollen tube. But the pollen grains in gymnosperms can be transferred by wind, and in angiosperms, there are various pollinating agents. Clear? So the gametes finally reach to their destination, and what happens then is fertilization, that is fusion of gametes. And what will happen? What will formed? Zygote will be formed. So the fertilization also can be external or it can be internal. If it happens inside the female reproductive part, then it is internal, and if it happens outside the body, it is external. So external fertilization is seen in case of algae. Most algae, not all algae. Remember this point. In all algae, there is no external fertilization. In most of the algae, external fertilization is seen. Internal fertilization is seen in some algae. The algae which shows oogamy, oogamous forms, right? Some brown algae which show oogamy, some red algae which show oogamy, they show internal fertilization, but mostly algae show external fertilization. Then in all bryophytes, in all pteridophytes, in all gymnosperms, and in all angiosperms, the fertilization is internal. Remember, in bryophytes, the fertilization used to take place inside archegonium, in pteridophytes inside archegonium, in gymnosperms inside archegonium, and in angiosperms inside embryo sac. I hope you remember this from plant kingdom. In all three of them, inside archegonium, and in angiosperms inside embryo sac. Okay, so now fertilization is happened and zygote is formed. Then comes the post-fertilization event. What comes in post-fertilization events? That in case of angiosperms, if I talk about angiosperms, what happens after fertilization? What happens is first embryogenesis. What is the embryogenesis? Formation of embryo from zygote. This happens after fertilization. Right? Then formation of endosperm. I have told you this in plant kingdom that in angiosperms, triple fusion occurs, which forms pen, primary endosperm nucleus. Endosperm is formed from it after fertilization. Then formation of fruit. Obviously, a fertilized ovary, an ovary inside which fertilization has happened, a fertilized ovary is called as a fruit. And then lastly, formation of seed. As soon as fertilization occurs inside ovule, it is not called as ovule but seed. So a fertilized ovule is a seed. Right? Is it clear? So these all includes the post-fertilization events, and we will deal with them in full detail in the chapter Sexual Reproduction in Flowering Plants. Okay? Fruit wall is called as pericarp, and seed coat is called as, and the coat of the seed is called as seed coat. Now what question comes is that which is the most important step, which is the most important step in sexual reproduction? Tell me, what will be your answer? Out of all the steps, which is the most important step in sexual reproduction? Can you tell? Think. The answer is fusion of gametes, or syngamy is the most important event in sexual reproduction. Right? And then which is the vital link? The question comes, the vital link between two generations. Which is the vital link between two generations? And your answer is zygote. The zygote is the progenitor of new generation. Progenitor means from which the new generation will come. Right? So obviously, the zygote will give rise to embryo, and embryo will form a new individual. Okay? So with this, our chapter is finished. I hope you understood the chapter well. What I have told you in between, the examples of isogametes, heterogametes, which plants are monoecious, which plants are dioecious, right? Then gamete transfer, gametogenesis, where internal external fertilization happens, where the gametes are formed by mitosis, where gametes are formed by meiosis, right? So please learn them by heart along with the lecture, and then read your NCRTs line by line, and your chapter will be prepared. So we will meet in the next lecture. Up till then, bye bye. Love you all.